Hello, and welcome back. I am fed up with summer and its heat, and I'm yearning for fall. Yearning for cooler weather, fall colors, pumpkin patches, and of course, Halloween. One thing that makes it feel more like spooky season to me is horror movies. While I do watch them year-round, I do my own personal 31 days of Halloween every October and try to watch a movie or a special every day. Now, I've heard multiple people in the horror community say that 2022 was the best year for new horror releases in the last few decades.
2022 will go down as probably the most stacked year for horror in our lifetime.
And yeah, I gotta say, the ones that I have already seen, I really liked most of them. But I want to see as many of them as I can to see if any of them can earn a spot on my yearly Halloween viewing list. So I found a list online of every horror movie released in 2022, cross-referenced with IMDb to find their release date, and I'm gonna try to watch them in order of release. I primarily used each movie's first limited release date when it would have become available for the most amount of people to watch. I avoided sequels and franchise entries if I haven't seen the others. So for example, I included Scream because I've seen all of those, but I did not include Halloween Ends because I'm very behind on that franchise. Same with Texas Chainsaw. One last thing, I have most streaming platforms, but not all of them. Streaming availability changes all the time though, so I will watch as many as I possibly can with the resources that I have. So without further ado, let's get started because this is a very long list. Alright, so I apologize for the delay in videos. On top of it being a busy and stressful month, I just really didn't have the motivation to talk about this one. I feel like there's not much to say about this movie. It's not good. I would say it is bad, but it's not as bad as Hellblazers, so it's not as fun to talk about. So I apologize in advance because, like this movie, this video is probably going to be painfully mediocre and dull. But alright, let's get this over with. Warhunt. When I first pulled this movie up, I was intrigued. It takes place in Germany in 1945. US soldiers looking for a downed plane get lost in the Black Forest. Now, you might as well call me Mike because I am obsessed with World War II like a middle-aged dad at a cookout. So I was looking forward to it because generally, if a movie's set around World War II, I'm here for it. However, this one was disappointing. Interesting premise, poor execution. Not to mention the entire movie is so dark, I felt like I couldn't see half of what was going on. I don't even feel like they bothered to name half their characters or make them interesting. As I was writing the synopsis, it occurred to me that I only knew maybe 2 or 3 of the characters' names. Speaking of which, the acting and casting was very hit or miss. Jackson Rathbone, who plays Walsh, was the standout in my opinion. He did great, no notes. Also, not much to say about Robert Knepper, who plays Sergeant Brewer. Did a relatively convincing job of playing different states of mind. But Mickey Rourke, just... why? Why Mickey Rourke? You expect me to believe that this man, whose face contains more plastic than the Monsanto House of the Future, was a major in World War II? You want me to believe that this pincushion for all of Hollywood's leftover Botox can pass for 1945? You're telling me no one else was available for this role? Of all the rough and tough actors you could have chosen to play a weathered army major, why him? He's so out of place.
No!
You're ruining my immersion. But anyway, let's just get into the movie. Spoiler alert from this point on, if for whatever reason you want to check this one out for yourself, at time of recording it is available on Hulu. So we open on a plane full of soldiers. They're suddenly surrounded by black feathers and things hitting the plane, which causes a fire in the engines and the plane goes down in Germany's Black Forest. After some lengthy opening credits, we meet up with Sergeant Brewer and his platoon as he's briefing them on their new mission to find and help recover what they can from this plane crash. Major Johnson drives up and... wait. Major Johnson? That's really his name? Did we check that's really his name? Did Mickey Rourke pick that one out himself? I'm just gonna call him Johnson. Johnson drives up and tells Sergeant Brewer that this guy Walsh is being added to his search party. Brewer doesn't really want him there, saying he already has enough men to worry about, but Johnson insists, telling Brewer that this plane went down with some sensitive materials on board, and Walsh is the only guy who can retrieve them. So Walsh joins up and they head deeper into the forest. Brewer asks Walsh what he's supposed to be looking for, but Walsh claims that the higher-ups don't tell him. That way, if he is captured, he literally can't divulge anything to the enemy. Meanwhile, Johnson heads back to base camp.
This just arrived from command, sir.
Okay, Private Microsoft Sam.
Sir, yes, sir.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't remember ever hearing this guy's name, so I'm just gonna call him Paul. So Johnson recruits Paul because he studied ancient Germanic dialects and tasks him with listening in on radio transmissions. He hears a woman in the background of a recording speaking in very old German about the Tree of Life. Back in the forest, Brewer's squad finds some deceased German soldiers strung upside down in the trees, and they deduce that they may have been punished deserters, as it looks like they were taken out by German weapons. Walsh finds one of their packs at the bottom of a tree under a bunch of black feathers, and as he's examining something he found inside, the squad is ambushed by some German soldiers. After a firefight, they capture the last German alive. They try to interrogate him and find out if he knows where the plane is, but he seems unable to speak. And Morgan, their medic, says it's shell shock due to severe trauma. They tie him up and bring him along so he can't go alert anyone else of their position. Further into the woods, they find an old windmill, and Brewer sends two of the men, Gardner and Rucker, to investigate. They peek inside and see two women who they assume are just civilians. Rucker hangs around watching them a little bit too long, though, when they catch him staring. They head back to keep moving with the squad, but not long after, it seems that one of the women, the redhead, followed them, and she lures Rucker away to Makeout Point. From there, Rucker sees the plane they're looking for. Oh, but apparently that can wait. Suddenly, the rest of the group hears a gunshot, and we see Rucker running away from the now wounded woman. They find Rucker pretty shaken up, and when asked why he fired his weapon, he claims he was charged by a wild pig. Brewer asks what he was doing out there alone in the first place, and Rucker, dodging the question, just tells them that he found the plane. Walsh manages to find what he's looking for, some film negatives showing the windmill that they passed earlier. They take note that none of the plane's crew is present, no bodies or anything, just more black feathers everywhere. As they start heading out to look for any possible survivors, they're attacked by a crazed Captain Rice who was on the plane when it crashed. After losing one of their men to him, they manage to get him down, but after he jumps right back up and attacks Sergeant Brewer, Walsh has no choice but to end it. After he's confirmed dead, they realize he's been opened up autopsy style, had his organs removed, been stuffed back up with feathers, and sewn back up accompanied by magic runes. This freaks a lot of the squad out, so they try to interrogate their German prisoner again. They finally manage to get one word out of him: witches. Back at base camp, Johnson tells Paul about this ancient German book of spells, I guess. He doesn't really call it anything specific. He tells Paul he has the first book, but there are two, and he's been looking for the second one for years. He does a terrible job explaining the magic aspect and the importance of the books, but thankfully Walsh will explain it better later. This book shows the Tree of Life, but it doesn't tell you where it is? Do you need both books to make the tree work? I have no idea. Long story short, book 2 is missing. Don't want Hitler to get the book or find the tree. Johnson sent Walsh to find both of them, I think. Can't be sure though, I can barely understand what Mickey Rourke says ever. As they're digging some graves after the attack, Walsh notices that Rucker seems to be in a lot of pain and is acting paranoid. He attempts to end his own suffering, but they manage to stop him and get him some morphine. They get him onto a stretcher and notice that he's got sores and boils starting on his lower stomach and extending down his legs. During the chaos, their prisoner makes a run for it. One of the soldiers chases him and tackles him, but is then attacked from behind by a witch. She slits his throat, collects the blood, and disappears. The squad makes their way over, see his drained body, and ask the prisoner what happened. He tells them that a witch did it, just like they did to all of his men. Rucker starts yelling from behind for more morphine, but Brewer says not until he tells them what happened to him. He tells them the prisoner's right, there are witches out here. We get a flashback to Makeout Point as Rucker tells us how he spent some intimate time with the redheaded girl, and she turned out to be a witch. He got scared after seeing what I'm guessing is her true form, and he fired at her in order to get away. He thinks that she cursed him. They set up camp for the night as it's now too dark to keep moving. Walsh sneaks away with the radio to contact Johnson and let him know he found the film in the plane. He also lets Johnson know that he thinks Brewer is losing it. The forest has been playing tricks on their minds. At this point, they're pretty disoriented. They've been walking in circles, hearing strange noises, seeing things that aren't there, like worms in their food, Lost Boys style. Now Sergeant Brewer thinks he's reporting to someone on the radio, but there's actually nobody there. When one of the men, Taft, grabbed the radio to prove to him that it isn't working, Brewer shoots him. Taft runs off into the woods and is found by the witches. It seems like they put a spell on him to make him look like a wild boar, so that when he runs back to the camp, he's attacked by the squad. They set up a spit and have some barbecue, but the spell soon wears off, and they see that it's actually Taft's body over the fire, not a pig. As they're all freaking out after realizing what they've just done, the witches then attack the camp and split up the group. Brewer gets lost in the woods and begins hearing voices brought on by the witches. convincing him that his squad is all against him, they don't respect his authority, and no one will listen to him. By morning, there's only a few squad members left alive, and Brewer and Rucker are both missing. The survivors plan to head out and hunt the witches, with Walsh leading them. Walsh must have told Johnson over the radio that he found that thing earlier. Paul calls it a solar compass, and they realize that the numbers they've been hearing over the radio might be coordinates to the Tree of Life, and the compass could help them find it. The survivors keep making their way through the woods, and they run into Brewer, who has now completely lost his mind. He begins chasing and taking out his own men. The witches are also hunting them, and soon hardly any soldiers remain alive. We follow one soldier into hiding. Now, I don't even know this guy's name, but somehow I think this was one of the most well-done scenes in the movie. As he's hiding, he looks down at a photo of his wife, just wishing he could see her again. We learned earlier in the movie that he was married shortly before deployment and his wife was pregnant. He has a 2-year-old back home that he's never even met. One of the witches appears outside his hiding spot and takes on his wife's appearance. Clearly he's under a spell, and he goes to her. She asks if he remembers their wedding day, and as she does a little reenactment of their vows, she pulls the pin from his grenade, placing the ring from it on his finger, and drops it. This was, in my opinion, the most interesting scene in the movie. It's devastating because she deprived him of ever getting back to his daughter and wife, but also, since he didn't realize he was under a spell, he technically did get to see his wife again and relive a happy memory, so it was maybe a slightly less painful end than what it could have been. It's heartbreaking, but also, we barely knew this guy. Why such a unique and drawn-out death for a side character? Now, I'm not sure what it says about the movie that the most touching death was a random side character. Weird choice. But let's move on. Walsh is alone and suddenly attacked by Brewer, but is luckily saved by Freeman, the only other survivor, once the whole kerfuffle is over. They get a radio call from Johnson, who give them the coordinates, and they head out to meet them there. The coordinates end up being for that windmill they came across earlier, and also was pictured in that film that Walsh found in the plane wreckage. The witches apparently put a concealment spell on it since they were last there, but Walsh and Freeman are able to find it and get inside using the solar compass. Inside, Walsh finds the complete Witches Archive, the full version of the book that Johnson only has the first volume of. Walsh says the Nazis have part 2. He also says that a US operative was able to get a photographic copy of this archive last week, and that film stock is what was retrieved from the plane. They read about the Tree of Life and see that it requires warriors' blood to bloom flowers that can make you live forever, hence why the witches have been collecting the soldiers' blood. Walsh explains to Freeman that Hitler was looking for this place and the tree to create a powerful, immortal German army. A German radio transmission had been intercepted a few days ago saying that the Germans found the tree, the same Germans that they found hanging in trees a few days ago on their way here. Remember how when Brewer first asked Walsh what he was looking for and Walsh said the higher-ups won't tell him? Well, he let slip to Freeman that that was a lie. He knew the whole time that the mission was to reach the tree before more Germans could. Freeman gets angry at Walsh for not warning them what they were up against, and in turn causing them to lose almost the entire squad. They start fighting and end up on a lower floor, where they see a door opening to a cellar. They head inside and find artifacts from wars from long past, and realize these witches have been collecting warrior blood for centuries. Now this is one thing I wish we could have seen a tiny bit more of. I like a good historical Easter egg. And even though they voiced it, visually seeing like a camera pan of just how much stuff they have and how old it is could really help drive the point home of just how long these witches have been doing this. So anyway, they go deeper, and they find the tree, surrounded by a pool of warrior blood. Freeman sees the witch that Rucker was with earlier in a glass coffin. Oh, speaking of Rucker, turns out he's here, fully under the witch's spell, and the sores they saw earlier are now spreading out over his entire body and half his face. The witches have told him that the tree can heal him, but as Walsh tries to tell him that they're lying, Rucker knocks him out and drags both of them into the cell in the corner. They wake up a little bit later to see that the other witches are back and the tree is now blooming. They use one of the flowers to revive Rucker's girlfriend in the coffin, and while they're distracted, Walsh and Freeman somehow manage to cut through their ropes with their dog tags. Rucker is told to bring them out, and Walsh attacks and stabs him. After a brief failed escape attempt, Freeman is sacrificed to the tree. As they're about to do the same to Walsh, Johnson comes in wildly firing. The witches flee, turning into crows. Johnson tells Walsh to grab the flowers from the tree and then sets it on fire. As they head back out, the witches return and put the fire out before chasing the men down. Johnson attempts to slow down the witches with some World War I mustard gas that they found, but it doesn't seem to work too well. At least not on the witches. There's a climactic fight, I think, anyway, based on the noises I heard, It was way too damn dark to actually see what was happening and who was fighting who. It looks like they've managed to beat the witches, but at some point, Johnson's gas mask was ripped off and he's done for. Walsh begins to set the place on fire and get out while he still can. He walks off into the woods as the windmill goes up in smoke. He stops and lays down, probably from exhaustion. Sometime later, some Germans come across his body. They look into his pack and it's just full of black feathers. They then hear him cough, so they go up to remove his gas mask, and it's the red-headed witch. Dun dun dun. How did she get there? And where's Walsh? Did the other witches survive too and just continue business as usual? Is there gonna be a sequel? I sure hope not. So that's Warhunt. Overall, I'm not a fan. It was just okay. I think the witches weren't delved into enough. I wish we had learned more about them. They don't even have names, they don't have personalities. Now, I'm not asking for like a hocus pocus level here, but if your movie's main villains are gonna be witches, give me more witch stuff, please. Compared to other witch films, Lords of Salem, Suspiria, even The Witch, this is just the most bare bones on witch content you could possibly get. Not to mention, you had scary witch makeup at some points, but it was all hidden. When Rucker gets jump scared, you see it so briefly it doesn't even register what it looks like. When they're hunting down Johnson and Walsh at the end, it's either shot from a mile away, or it's in the darkest shadow possible. You gave them detailed and unique costumes, but we only get to see the redheads in any kind of lighted area. You went through an awful lot of costuming and makeup work only to barely showcase it at all. Now, I know this is probably intentional, but I just feel like I'm in the dark for most of the movie. It just feels like it takes so long to actually get to the point. Why did we have to go through the whole Brewer losing his mind plot? Couldn't we have come to the same conclusion if he had been taken out by a witch or during a firefight? Is he just a decoy villain until they confirm there are witches? It's fine if you want to subvert audience expectations and throw in twists and stuff, but you have to keep the audience engaged and interested until the end for them to care. I was not engaged or interested. I was bored and annoyed that I couldn't see anything. I may get some flack for this, but I hate found footage movies. I feel like shaky cam is a total cop-out. However, I know most of the time it is due to low budget, which is understandable, but I would still rather see the movie. Therefore, I feel the same way about movies that are dark as hell. It's a cop-out. A much worse cop-out for Warhunt, especially because they had a $12 million budget. Alright, I'm sorry. I'll stop complaining about the lighting now, but that's just my thoughts. If you've seen this movie, let me know what you thought. Are there like nuances or hidden meanings that I'm missing, or were you just as bored as I was? Again, sorry for the delay in videos. I'm gonna try to have more videos out soon, but since I do work full-time, I have limited time during the week both to watch the movies and work on the reviews. So I don't really want to commit to a concrete upload schedule just yet until I can get a better flow going. So if you don't want to miss future uploads, you can hit that subscribe button down below. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time. We meet up with Sergeant Brewer and his platoon. Hunt the witches with Walsh. Oh my God, Johnson's gas mask was gas mask. Johnson's gas mask was. I said it again. Gas mask. Gas mask. Fuck's sake.